I'm here with Scott Hamilton, figure skating legend. You won 4 worlds in the beginning of the 1980s in a row. After that, you won an Olympic gold medal in 1984.
That was a long time ago.
That was a really long time ago, especially for someone so young as yourself. You were a professional figure skater for many, many years, and you're also well known for your battles with and victories over different health issues, which we're going to get into a little bit later on. You wrote successful books in the last 15 years, the latest of which you can see in the background there. You wrote earlier this year, got released earlier this year. And you're married and you live in Tennessee with your family nowadays. Scott, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, it's great to meet you too. Originally from Bowling Green, Ohio. I was adopted at 6 weeks of age and grew up in this very small town, a university town. My parents were both school teachers. My mother, when I was brought home to be a member of this family, was teaching 2nd grade at a very small school. And my father was a PhD professor of biology at Bowling Green State University. And as I grew up and as I got into skating, my mother needed a bigger job with more salary, and so she became an associate professor at Bowling Green State University in the area of home economics, but specializing in marriage and family relations.
All right.
Yeah. So I grew up in an academic household and ended up becoming an athlete, which goes against type. But when you're an adopted child, I guess it's kind of like, okay, let's see what happens. There's no expectation. Well, my parents were really smart people. I mean, obviously academically smart, but they were also kind of life smart. My dad was in charge of the, way up there in international studies. So we'd have people coming in from all over the world to, be at Bowling Green. So I met people of many different ethnic backgrounds, many different cultures, and that was really extraordinary growing up with that. But it was also a way of which they treated life very much with an open hand. It was like, let's see what happens next, and let's be smart enough to react to it in a really positive manner. Well, I was in and out of hospitals for 4 years with an illness they could not diagnose no matter where I went. I go from a very small town hospital, Wood County Memorial, where I grew up, to Toledo, which was bigger, and then to bigger in Ann Arbor at University of Michigan, to the biggest of them all, which was Boston Children's in Boston. And not having any real path forward, except for the last thing our doctors told us in Boston was, we can't figure this thing out, go home and live a normal life. That's where the rink at Bowling Green State University had just opened, and the coaches there were doing a Saturday morning learn to skate, for all the kids in town. So it became kind of the one destination at the university that was used probably more by the city than it was by the university itself. They wanted to have a hockey team. They wanted to have phys ed classes with skating. They had a curling rink. They wanted to have curling and teach curling. And in that, they needed population base. So Bowling Green, the city of Bowling Green, became kind of the population base for that. And so I went on Saturday mornings to give basically my parents a morning off, just to kind of recharge their batteries after everything they'd been through with me, medically. And it just was, all of a sudden, my health started to get better, and I started, kind of thriving physically and emotionally. I found something that I could do as well as the well kids and as well as the best athletes in my grade. So it was one of those things where, just sort of by accident, I kind of found something that worked when nothing else did. Yes. I could say, well, maybe I started eating ice cream and that was what it was, because, in my illness, they took me off of flour, sugar, and dairy. And,
oh, wow.
And when I was in Boston, the doctor said, none of that's working, so you might as well let him have ice cream and birthday cake for the first time. So the two things that were introduced into my diet were birthday cake and ice cream and skating. I choose skating.
Right.
Yeah, seems like the healthier option. Well, the only thing you can attribute success to is a mountain of failure. Honestly, it's like I skated. I showed some ability to do it. I always joke with people now. It's kind of the joke, but a joke is always based in a little bit of truth, right? So I say if you're a girl in skating and you medal, you're really super good, right? But if you're a boy in skating and you don't medal, you probably should be working a little bit harder. And for me, I did okay regionally. I was average sectionally. That's the feed-in process to the national championships. And by the time I got to nationals, I was like an abysmal failure. My first nationals, they put the novice men's event right before the senior ladies championship on the kind of the night, closing night. I was like, why would anyone put a little novice man through the idea that skating in front of 17,000 people is a really good idea, their first nationals? I bombed. I fell 5 times and came in dead last. So there was that. Then the next year I went back and I came in 9th out of 10. And I went up to junior, came in 7th out of 9. So I really wasn't doing much. I didn't really understand how to work, how to train, how to take in information from my coaches in a really productive way. And so for me, it was just more or less the time spent on the ice is what allowed me to get better. Every now and then I'd have little breakthrough moments. And 1976 became kind of one of those breakthrough moments where my mother came home and said she was diagnosed with cancer and that this would be my last year in skating. And I said, wow, okay. She didn't seem really upset about the cancer, so I figured if she's not upset about it, she's giving me permission not to be upset about it either. So I looked at that in a way that I thought, well, if she's got this, then if I got 1 year left in skating, I might as well figure this thing out. So I pushed all my chips in the middle of the table, and the coach that I'd been with, who was an amazing, wonderful, awesome coach, an Olympic gold medalist in his own right, Pierre Brunet, in the 1932 Olympics, he and his wife won the pair gold medal in figure skating. Right. And I thought he knew everything about figures, he knew everything about blade design, he knew everything about how things needed to work. He was giving me all this incredible information of which I had no ability to process. He made me wear a white lace on my left foot when I was doing figures, so I knew the difference between my right foot and my left foot. That's how clueless I was back then. And when he retired, I went to another coach, Evie Scottfold, who was a little bit more of a crack the whip kind of guy, much more of a disciplinarian. And I decided, I'll just give that a try. And so I went out and I just put my head down, went to work, and I won juniors the next year, junior national championship, and that saved my skating life. So going from there, from that period between the 76 Olympics and the 80 Olympics, a coach saw that I had promise, found me a sponsor, and thought, oh, okay, I could, get behind having an American male instead of having all these women. He was the same coach, his name was Carlo Fassi, that coached the year that I went to him. He coached Dorothy Hamill and John Curry to Olympic gold medals. I don't know if there's ever been a coach since that coached Olympic gold medalists in 2 different events, but he did. And so I figured, well, obviously I have a capable coach, as well try to work this thing out. But the next year I went back to my failing ways. I call it the trifecta. I was 18, I was sponsored, and I had my own apartment. That's a recipe for disaster. Okay, nothing to draw on except for what I want to do right now. And so it was in that year that I went back to nationals, and I shouldn't probably even made it in hindsight, but came in 9th again. At 9th, I seem to own that 9th place position at nationals. And the pain point there, the thing that still haunts me to this day, was that was the last time my mother would ever see me skate in competition. So I basically went for a walk that morning, and I had some things to sort out. And so what I sorted out was that I have a lot of people know nobody more than my mother sacrificing everything to put me into skating. The least I could do is my part. And so I called up Carlo and I said, different person's coming back to Denver, and be prepared because I'm going to throw everything I can at this thing. And he said, yeah, sure, right. So I got back to Denver. He had nothing to base anything on besides the fact that I was underachieving. And I drove him so insane that he sent me to Canada for the summer to get new programs and to kind of get rid of whatever was driving me and him insane, which was my desire just to work. And it was that time in Canada where I figured out I got my triple Lutz, I was landing triple flip, I was doing all these different triples, which at the time wasn't really happening, multiple, Terry Kubica did it, but after that it kind of dropped off again to kind of get back to a norm of a 2 triple type of skater, and nobody got into the Lutz barrier yet. So from that point on, at 78, I made it to the Worlds that year. I went from 9th the year before to 3rd. Then the next year I had an injury and I kind of bottomed out. My relationship with Carlo kind of fell apart. So I went to Philadelphia to take from Don Laws, and it was there that he taught me truly how to train. He made me, I was a little more mature by that point too. I became very, it was on me to show up on time, to use every minute of the practice ice, to work with intention, not just show up. And he taught me how to train. My leash was this long with Don, and he was a very much a disciplinarian role. That year I made it to the Olympics, came in 5th at the World Championships, and I thought that was, probably a spectacular result considering that 8th was my goal. When 8th is your goal and you come in 5th, that's a finish first moment right there. So I 5th place, I woke up one morning to have breakfast, and I realized that the top 3 guys, Robin Cousins, Jan Hoffman, and Charlie Tigner, had all retired to pursue their lives. And so all I had to do was wake up, and I'm ranked 2nd in the world. It's a pretty good cup of coffee. So what happened next was, what do I need to do to win? Right? Now all of a sudden winning became possible because I'm just this close, right? So I had to do something I never thought I'd ever do, and that was understand that compulsory figures were what was holding me back. I had an enemy, and the enemy was me, and it was like I didn't like doing compulsory figures. So I had to find a way to fall in love with them, because the guy I had to beat was brilliant at compulsory figures. So that next year I got close enough to him in order to be able to make up, because I was good at freestyle. And starting in October of 1980 to March of 1984, I never lost another competition. And there was a lot of luck involved in there. There was times where I didn't perform at my top, but other people still allowed me to win by not performing at the top of their game either. And I figured out after the first year when I won the Worlds that, my goodness, I'm this world champion guy. I didn't feel worthy of the title at all. But then when I got to the year 2 and 1, I realized that I'm just competing against guys. They're just guys. Like Nathan Chen was in the building a few days ago, and I told him, I said, you're world champion? He goes, yeah. It's like, whoa. And it's like, I thought that too. You're just competing against guys. That's all it is. It's not this big highfalutin title with all this. It's just guys. You're just competing against guys. And he's like, okay. And think of it that way. It's just, they're just guys. Go out and beat those guys. That's all you have to do is just beat those guys. And so I figured that in the next, throughout each time, I just had to figure out what I needed to do to win. What do I need to do to win this year? How far do I have to take it? How much do I have to push myself beyond capacity in order to be able to win this year? And what ended up happening was a 4-year winning streak that to this day doesn't make sense to me at all, and to this day hasn't happened since. And I don't say that to brag. I just say it that a lot went into that, and everything's possible if you allow it to be. And that's kind of why I wrote Finish First. Winning isn't natural, but it's possible if you allow it to come into your life. You just welcome it in and just do it, whatever it takes in order to do that. So that was step one. And then how do you stay there? Step two is, it's like I have dads coming up to me all the time saying, I want my son to go to the Olympics. Can you tell him what it takes to go to the Olympics? And I go, yeah, it's actually very simple. Just be willing to do something at a level that others won't. Not can't, won't, right? So it's just committing to a level others won't. And it's a remarkable process, because I'm very unlikely that any of those things would have ever happened to me, but it came out of a lot of losing, and then it came out of a commitment to be better than I've ever thought I could be. You can't make, you can't make anything satisfying to the taste with one ingredient, right?
Right.
So it just comes down to there are many ingredients in all of this. Some of it was, I look back on my illness, it stopped me from growing for several years. Well, I had the perfect height to be able to be quick in the air and to recover quickly, with stamina. I had a judge once tell me, an international judge tell me that I was too small to be competitive internationally. So I go, okay, how do I fix that? And I realized that that's, it was sort of a criticism, but it was based in opinion, not fact, because the last American to win an Olympic gold medal was kind of my size, so, you can't let anybody pull you away from your dreams. So it was size, it was, so much of it was where I was, what I was doing, and what I was willing to do at the same time of who I was competing against. All those things were factors as well. I can look back on it. You can always look back on things and say, I maybe should have turned right more often than left, but at the time, I think I did what was needed. Like my whole idea of stepping on the ice in 1984 in Sarajevo was I didn't want to get into my opening position and have one would've, could've, or should've. I wanted to eliminate every would've, could've, or should've. And if I could do that, then I could be satisfied with whatever happened there. And I've looked at that in my life now. It's like I made a mountain of mistakes. I've done things as poorly as they can be done, and I've done things as well as they can be done, right? But it's like if I can every day approach it where at the end of the day when I turn off the lights to go to sleep, if I can just eliminate as many would'ves, could'ves, and should'ves as possible, that's probably a pretty good day, pretty productive day, So, I've learned so much. And again, that's why I wrote Finish First, is because I realize there's a lot of people out there that have something burning, this desire to do something more. And I wrote it with the idea that if I can do it, anyone can. Most of the early charitable stuff, for me, was driven in cancer. My mother died of cancer in 1977, and I just wanted to be a fundraiser. So I did that for a number of years. When I started Stars on Ice with IMG, they need a corporate sponsor to make things work, right? It's really good to step out the door knowing that most of your bills are paid through sponsorship. And so with Discover Card, they were a brand new company at the time. We were brand new, they were brand new. It was kind of like we're all bumping into each other trying to figure out the best way to do this. But they always had a charitable identity. And with them came Make-A-Wish. And for us, Make-A-Wish was a perfect, charitable foundation to work with, because there were so many kids. Skating was at the top of its game. There were so many kids that wanted to be skaters, that loved skating, whose wish it was to meet a lot of the members of our cast. And so we would get them on, get these kids on the ice, their families, whatever. We would do a lot of media around Make-A-Wish, and we would raise money through the tour for Make-A-Wish Foundation as well. So there was a time there where the tours kind of spiked, where we were the largest fundraising entity for Make-A-Wish I think that they've ever dreamed of having. And so with that came a lot of recognition within the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So we raised money for them for a very long time. when Discover Card went through a management change, of course, anytime there's management change, there's an identity change, right? They decided that they were going to put more into marketing in different ways than ice skating. And that's when Target stores, who I had a relationship with, they came on board. And with them came Target House at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So we fundraised money for them. And through that, I met Carrie Morgan. Through that, I also, Tony Thomas introduced me to the woman who would become my wife. Through that, I watched this basic long-term housing facility for patients at St. Jude. Kids that really were going to be there for a long time because there was no quick fix for them. I met, Carrie Morgan, who was running Target House. And it was an amazing friendship that came about there, because when it came time for me to take the CARES initiative that was growing at the Cleveland Clinic as a fundraising entity for cancer, everything I learned when I went through my own cancer, we would just pour into the CARES initiative at the Cleveland Clinic, which became chemocare.com, which is a one-stop shop for anything you need to know about chemotherapy, because that didn't exist when I was going through my cancer. Fourth Angel Mentoring Program, which is pairing newly diagnosed patients with survivors to help them as a life coach, role model, everything else. And then we were funding research. When I took CARES as an initiative and turned it into a foundation, I needed somebody to run it. So I asked Carrie Morgan to come on board, and she's done a spectacular job of building CARES into what it is today. And it's a lot of work. But we're making a difference in the cancer community, and I think we're going to continue to make a big difference in the cancer community just through our events, our outreach, just to be able to fund research that needs to be funded specifically. And so, I'm really grateful that through all of this, the good Lord has put in front of me the ability to make a difference through my love of skating. I never understood faith. I had it, but I never truly understood it until I met my wife. And she basically, it was one of those kind of like one of these moments, I knew that I met the person I wanted to spend my life with. And then we were dating, and she just asked that question. She just came to me and she said, I need to ask you a very serious question. It's like, oh, we're going to be serious now, because we were just laughing and joking and having fun about everything we were doing. She goes, yeah, this is a big one. And I go, anything. I'll answer anything you have to answer, because I'm in this thing. I'm in it to win it. And she said, where are you in your relationship with Jesus Christ? And I go, oh, okay. And I joke to this day that I said what any smart guy would say. It's like, where do you want me to be? But I already had something in there just dying to come out. I had something that was just gnawing at me. Like, what is this all about? Why? It's kind of like, why have these things happened to me? And not just the things that have been a challenge, but why have the good things happened too? And what am I supposed to do with all that? So I went to meet with her minister, and I told him all of my concerns, all of my questions, all of my kind of misunderstandings. I just took them all. I just threw them at him, and he just said, I couldn't agree with you more. Okay, that's a good place to start. And so he just handed me the Bible, and he said, have you ever read this? And I go, yeah, it's confusing. And he goes, do you like history? And it's like, it's my favorite subject. School, it's always history. And he goes, this is a book of history. Every single thing in this book happened, but I want you to read it with the understanding that God did this. They weren't just fables and people, and this is, a nice thing and all that. These are things that happened in our history that actually happened that God was a part of. And I said, I could totally do that. He goes, when you get to the New Testament, then we'll sit down and we'll talk again. And I kind of poured into it. I couldn't wait to get to the New Testament. It was just funny that when I started going to church, the first group of lessons were the prodigal son. It's the son that wanted his half of the inheritance, and he just took off and he squandered it, and then he went through it, and his life was just a mess, and he came back to his father and he said, I'll work as a slave, but I never want to be separated from you again. And his father just celebrated 100%, like, this is the greatest thing ever. And I related to that story in a big way, because I just felt like everything that I ever accomplished was great, but to what end? You know, what am I doing with this? And where am I going? And how can I better live this life? Because I know I've made a mountain of mistakes. And it's not about the mistakes. It's about what comes next. It's about how do you leave that life and embrace a new one. And it was there that I really found peace, because so much of the things, the way that I'd lived and everything else in my previous life, I was winning the Olympics, and I was selling, Stars and Ice was selling out arenas, and we were, all these great things were happening. I was doing well financially, but there was something missing. And I realized, and through Tracy and our courtship and just this kind of introduction of faith, it just came down on me like a ton of bricks. It was like all of that led me to this, and now I can find a way to truly enjoy each day. And I always thought I did. I was always truly optimistic in many respects, because I always joke, when you're a short, bald guy, you find optimism in just about everything. But it was through this journey that continues this day. I'm hungry. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to introduce others to something that has changed my life for the better. There's so much hopelessness in this world. Just, hey, spend 2 hours watching the news and tell me where hope lies, right? It all comes from this, since the beginning of time, Father who just wants the absolute best for us. So I'm learning. I always joke that, well, not so much anymore, but for a long time I said, hey, faith-wise, I feel like I'm still in rental skates. I have so much to learn. It's like, now I'm starting to compete a little, Right. So faith is now the driving force in everything I do. And it's the greatest thing that I've ever been able to come to know.
Right.
Because without it, everything just sort of goes away. It's not, and honestly, I can say that those battles, you're more forged in fire than you are in good fortune, right? Like I tell people all the time, I meet people daily, and I can tell you this: those that have won the lottery are not as well off in the way that they live their lives as someone who's going through cancer. We are wired more for challenge, much more so than we are for good fortune. So in that, I say, yeah, I feel really fortunate that I've been able to survive all this stuff, but nobody gets out of this life alive. They just don't. So in that, I say, yeah, I've seen both sides. I've seen the best of the best, and I've seen the worst of the worst. And now I'm kind of in this position where, what do I do with all that? And I realize now that the more I understand Scripture, the more I understand God, and the more I understand Jesus and who He was and what He's done for us, the more I understand that's what it's all about. It's not about winning the lottery. It's not about surviving cancer. It's not about any of that. It's all about what we do with every single day we're given and how we respond to unfortunate things. It's like I tell anybody to listen, it's like, you've truly survived cancer. And they go, how? And I go, when you get upset in traffic, because you're back to sweating the small stuff. And it's true. It's all about the journey. It's all about the pursuit. It's all about trying to be better today than you were yesterday, and in that being a little bit better going into tomorrow than you are today. It's giving up. Surrender is never an option, right? And it's so tempting. You know, when you're at your lowest of the low, it's really easy to kind of go, okay, I give up. But it's not about that. It's about the hope of his promise, the hope of his message, the hope of the truth, the hope of that this life is just a blip compared to the big picture. And it's how we live this life that truly allows us to understand his love. And, you know, at times a lot of people go, yeah, but you don't know what I'm going through. It's like, I may know what you're going through. I've been through a lot of stuff. But at the same time, it's like, well, what's next? What's next? Where are you going with this? And what do you hope is the end game in all of this? And for me, the only thing that answers all of those questions are Jesus. You know, I just saw a really cool acceptance speech Chris Pratt gave at the MTV Awards. It was great. Oh, you got to see it because it's so brilliant. Because, but he says, I have 9 things to tell you, and the third one was, if you want your dog to take some medicine, you wrap it in some meat because then it's really good for him to do this thing. But that was kind of his whole message. It was a message of faith. It was a message of Jesus. It was a message of prayer. It was a message of all this wrapped in a little bit of burger so we can all do it. He kept the kids. He would introduce something kind of shocking, weird, or gross or whatever to keep the kids interested while he was telling them to protect your soul, to pray every day, and to understand that God loves you no matter what you do. It was really brilliant. I loved it. And the second he said the thing about the hamburger, I go, oh boy, he's wrapping this whole thing in that. And it was brilliantly done, because it's like, how do you invite people into faith? How do you interest young people who feel like life is going to just be perfect and forever? I can do whatever I want. I can eat what I want. I can drink what I want. I can do what I want. And I'm going to be just fine. To a point. It's just when you get to a certain level, you realize that, man, it's better. It's when you look at the whole arc of your life, it's really better to keep it focused on him than on yourself. There's just something about it that just allows you to live with a clear conscience. It allows you to face tomorrow with a better lived yesterday and today. So I'm looking forward to whatever time I have left, whatever that is. I want it to be in service, and I want it to be doing good things. And however it's received, I want it to be done in a way that it's I did it right, and I did it for the best reasons and the best ways possible. And again, you know, we live our days joyfully, productively. And, you know, we're all a part of this somehow, some way. We have something to share, something to offer each other. If we, you know, it's like, if we're completely oblivious, ultimately, throughout our entire lives, we miss kind of the joy of it. We miss what was, you know, we might have just, oh man, there was something there that I just walked right past it. You know, I didn't know. I just didn't know. And for me, that's where faith comes. It's like, I wish I would have. It's all those would haves, could have, should haves that I talked about before. But all of those go away with Jesus. All of them go away. All those would have, could have, should haves now become this is what I will do, this is what I should do, and this is what I can do. And it's all those go away, and now you're directed towards a better purpose, and all that other stuff goes away. And a lot of people, for them, it's hard to understand that. It's hard to understand. It's like, well, what's what I've done, what I've been through, everything that I've experienced is mine forever. Yeah, it is, as a reminder, but we have no right to hang on to it as long as we give it up. And that comes through just surrender yourself, So where if you're not there now, that's fine. Maybe this conversation will light just a little bit of a spark that may have you leaning in a little bit. But I can tell you this, that I've never been stronger, more resilient, and more in touch with who I am as a person, more than when I understood the reason for all of this. And that's him. A few years ago, I always thought it'd be really fun to be able to find a way to share my knowledge of skating without actually becoming a 60-hour-a-week skating coach.
Right.
I knew that I had something to share, but I needed to kind of get in, like stick my toe in the water first and kind of get in. I got a call from the Nashville Predators saying, we're opening an ice rink. Would you like to start to learn to skate? And I said, absolutely. And then I hung up with them, and it's like, okay, I don't really know how to do that. So I called up David Kirby, who's his father, Michael, founded the ISIA, now the ISI. And I said, can you help me learn, teach me how to do a learn to skate? And he goes, absolutely. So David came out several times and helped me kind of create the foundation of learn to skate. And then from there, we just sort of formulated, how do we want to be an outlier in the industry? And now with the Nashville Predators and their marketing platforms, the fact that they manage this arena, the fact that they can kind of do whatever they want, with the idea of building a fan base, building hockey players, building, good skaters. I was like, well, I could do that, but ultimately what it's become is just through the process of doing everything with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. I was saying, how do we build a learn to skate program in a way that hasn't happened before? And so, leveraging all assets, it's between the Predators, their industry growth fund, everything else. We've been able to come up with some pretty fantastic programs of how to bring people into give them ice, give them that knowledge of what skating means, and bring them in a way where it's theirs to pursue in any fashion they wish to do it. A lot of times when a figure skating person builds a learn to skate, they build it in a way that goes like this. It goes, all right, we're going to teach you how to figure skate. And it's like, well, that's not, we're here to build hockey players, but we're also here to build recreational skaters, to build figure skaters, to build any pursuit anybody wants to have in skating, we're just going to allow that to happen. We're going to supply that to them. So with the Learn to Skate program, the Skating Academy, it's bringing people in. If they want to be hockey players, giving them that foundation where they're not coming and being a tripod, where they put their skates on, they're like, okay, the only way I can stand up is to lean on my stick. They're not competitive. Come to us, we're going to teach you how to skate, probably in figure skates first, because the blade's a little flatter, they're a little bit easier to manage. You'll be able to progress quicker on a flatter blade, and when you're at a certain level, if you want to play hockey, we can transfer you over to hockey skates in one day and you'll be completely proficient. Instead of just starting with all the equipment and doing that big thing and then sort of leaning on your stick the whole time and watching people skate around you, get them skating well. On the recreational side and with the figure skating side, they kind of go hand in hand, because what we realized and what I've learned in this process is if you put a kid on the ice to play hockey, he's playing hockey and you're sitting in the stands watching. But if you put a kid on learn to skate and you want to experience something with your child, you can totally do that with them. A parent can learn to skate right next to their youngest or their whole family. Right. They can do it as a family unit. So what we've learned through the learn to skate process is when, in hockey, it's great. You put a player on the ice, they're competitive, they know how to skate, they can do their stuff. When you build the learn to skate program and, there's figure skate, whatever that is, it's a community. We're building a community of people that come together, that do things together, that build new friendships and forge new, kind of new ways of building friendships and community just through the ice and everything that brings to people and what they have in common. And it's truly magnificent to see the kids that have come through, the parents that have come through, adult skaters, hockey players, whatever it is. All we want to do is give them the love of skating. And so what was intention, normally would be like, I'm going to become a figure skating coach. It's like, yeah, that'll happen in its time. In the meantime, let's bring as many people to the ice as possible so they can fall in love with skating, and they're going to want to stay with it and make this a part of, not just how they spend the recreational time, but kind of building a new kind of community, a new connectivity where people have a shared passion for something that goes beyond what happens here, but what happens in Bridgestone Arena, what happens in competitions around the country, what happens where if a family wants to go, like I had a guy, I taught him one time, all he wanted to do was learn how to skate well enough to take his girlfriend to New York and on Rockefeller Center ice be able to skate well enough to get around so he can get down on one knee and propose. I was like, I can help you with that, so whatever the goals are, whatever people's mindsets are for what they want to learn, what they want to experience, we're here to guide them. Very open hand. We don't have an agenda. It's just we want you to love skating as much as we do. I learned it years ago. I heard somebody talking about an open hand versus a clenched fist, and I thought, that's really an interesting concept. I wonder what that means. And what that means is if you want to hold something in your hand, and you want to hold the most you possibly can in your hand, if you hold your hand with an open palm and you welcome things into it, you can stack it up. Let's say sand. Sand is love, whatever it is. You can stack it up. It comes in a bunch. But if you do it with a clenched fist, like this is my way, the only way, this is the only way it's going to work, and I'm going to force you into something, right? I'm going to just hold on to it with everything I've got. I'm not going to let go. I'm going to hang on to something, whatever that is. Pretty soon you're going to have to open your hand to see what's inside, and there's nothing fits in there. It's empty. So I approach everything in my life, whether it be skating academy, broadcasting, speaking, writing, more importantly, raising my family, my marriage, whatever that is. If I can approach everything with an open hand instead of a clenched fist, I allow things to happen that are amazing and extraordinary, and I learn from them and I grow from them. But as long as I'm gripping everything so tight that nothing fits in there, I'm never going to grow, I'm never going to learn, I'm never going to be better off tomorrow than I am today because I've been hanging on to either yesterday or hanging on to my concepts and my ideas and me, whatever. The second you approach life like this, so many more things can happen. So I've really adopted this open hand versus a clenched fist mentality of everything I do, I want to invite things in. I want to allow them to stack up. I want them to accumulate. I want them to grow. And I can't do that if there's no room, right? So everything I do, and I really try to stay focused on that because it's really easy to get into this, and it's kind of sometimes tougher to hang on to that when you kind of know who you are, where you've been, and what you're all about. But man, I tell you, the more people I meet that have this open hand philosophy of really allowing things to happen instead of making them happen, they're a lot happier and a lot more productive.
All right, thank you, Scott. That was the first little part of our interview. We're going to segue on to our next part later on.